The sound of the auctioneer's gavel striking wood echoed through Lila Bennett's chest like the final nail in a coffin, and she stood there in the dusty street of Wilson, Kansas, watching strangers cart away everything her father had built over 30 years. It was September 1882, and the prairie stretched endlessly in every direction, golden wheat fields swaying under an unforgiving sun that seemed to mock her circumstances. Lila was 23 years old, and in the span of 6 months, she had buried both parents to influenza and watched their cattle ranch dissolve into debt she never knew existed. The bank had come calling with papers and cold eyes, and now the Bennett ranch was just a memory being divided among bidders who saw only profit in her loss. She wore her mother's best dress, navy blue with tiny white flowers, pressed and proper despite everything. Her dark blonde hair was pinned up in a style that took her an hour that morning, because if she was going to lose everything, she would lose it with her head held high. The dress hung a bit loose now after months of rationing food to pay workers who eventually left anyway, but no one needed to know that. No one needed to know she had eaten nothing but hard bread and preserves for the last 2 weeks. The auctioneer called out the final items, a set of furniture from the house, her mother's china cabinet, the good silverware that had come all the way from Pennsylvania when her parents first married. Lila turned away before she could see who bought them. Some things were too painful to witness. A man in a fine suit approached her. His shoes shined despite the dust that coated everything in Wilson during the dry season. "Miss Bennett, the house needs to be vacated by sundown. Those were the terms." "I am aware of the terms, Mr. Henderson." Her voice came out steady, which felt like a small victory. "I will be gone within the hour." "And where will you go?" His question held curiosity rather than concern. "That is my business." She met his eyes with a level gaze that made him look away first. She had nowhere to go. Her only living relative was an aunt in St. Louis, who had made it clear in her last letter that she had no room for a penniless niece. Lila had $47 to her name, hidden in a small pouch sewn into her petticoat, and a carpet bag with 2 changes of clothes, her mother's wedding ring, and a photograph of her parents on their wedding day. The town of Wilson had grown in recent years, benefiting from the Kansas Pacific Railway that brought cattle buyers and settlers heading further west. Main Street bustled with activity. The general store, the hotel, 2 saloons, a church, the land office, and a dozen other establishments that formed the heart of this prairie community. Lila had grown up here, knew every family, every face. But knowing people and having them help were 2 different things in these times. Everyone had their own struggles, their own families to feed. She walked back to the ranch house for the last time, her boots kicking up small clouds of dust. The house looked smaller somehow, stripped of the life that had filled it. Her footsteps echoed on the wooden floors as she moved through empty rooms, collecting the few possessions she could carry. In her parents' bedroom, she stood for a long moment, remembering her mother's laugh, her father's steady presence. Then she forced herself to move on because lingering would break something inside her that she needed to keep intact. By the time she walked back into town, the sun was beginning its descent, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. She made her way to the Wilson Hotel, a 2-story building with a covered porch where men often sat smoking and discussing cattle prices. The hotel was run by Mrs. Crawford, a widow who had always been kind to Lila's mother. The lobby smelled of lemon oil and tobacco. Mrs. Crawford looked up from the front desk, her expression shifting from professional pleasantness to sympathy when she recognized Lila. "Oh, my dear girl, I heard about the auction. I am so terribly sorry." Thank you, Mrs. Crawford. I would like to inquire about a room. Lila kept her voice businesslike. The older woman's face fell. Lila, I would love to help you, but rooms are $3 a week, and I am afraid I cannot offer charity. My son in Topeka sends what he can, but the hotel barely breaks even most months. I am not asking for charity. I can pay. Lila reached for the pouch in her petticoat. Can you pay for more than a few weeks? Mrs. Crawford's question was gentle but firm. Because I know your situation, dear, and I would hate to take your money when you will need every penny. Pride flared in Lila's chest, hot and defensive. I will find employment. I can work. Doing what, honey? The general store has all the help it needs. The saloons are no place for a decent woman. The hotel is full up on staff, and with winter coming, nobody is looking to hire. Lila's jaw tightened. Then I will think of something else. May I have a room or not? Mrs. Crawford studied her for a long moment, then sighed. Room 7, top of the stairs. But Lila, promise me you will be smart about this. Pride is all well and good, but it will not keep you warm come December. I will manage. Lila took the key, paid for 1 week, and climbed the stairs with her carpet bag, her back straight and her eyes dry. Room 7 was small but clean, with a single bed, a washstand, a chair, and a window overlooking Main Street. Lila set down her bag and sat on the edge of the bed, finally allowing herself to feel the weight of her exhaustion. But she would not cry. Crying served no purpose. Instead, she removed her boots, lay back on the bed still fully dressed, and stared at the ceiling until darkness filled the room and sleep eventually claimed her. The next morning, Lila woke with the sun and dressed in her second-best dress, a simple brown cotton that was practical and neat. She pinned her hair up carefully, washed her face in the basin, and examined herself in the small mirror above the washstand. She looked tired but presentable. That would have to do. She spent the morning walking up and down Main Street, inquiring about work at every establishment. The responses were all variations of the same theme. No positions available. Sorry for your troubles. Maybe try elsewhere. By noon, she had exhausted every option in town and returned to her room with her pride intact, but her prospects dimmer. That afternoon, she sat in the hotel dining room with a cup of coffee she could barely afford, considering her options. She could try to hire on at one of the ranches as a cook or housekeeper, but most ranchers wanted married couples or had family members filling those roles. She could attempt to take in sewing or laundry, but Wilson already had 2 women doing that, and the town was not large enough to support a third. She could leave Wilson entirely, but traveling cost money, and arriving in a strange town with no connection seemed even more daunting than staying where at least people knew her name. A commotion outside drew her attention. Through the window, she saw a group of men on horseback riding into town, trailing several head of cattle. Cowboys, by the look of them, likely driving a herd north or returning from a sale. They were dusty and trail-worn, the kind of men who spent more time under open sky than under a roof. One of them stood out, not because he was larger or louder than the others, but because of the way he carried himself. He dismounted with easy grace, tall and lean with dark hair that needed cutting, and several days' worth of beard growth. He said something to one of the other men that made them laugh, then started toward the hotel. Lila looked away, stirring her coffee. Other people's business was not her concern. The man entered the dining room, removed his hat, and approached the counter where Mrs. Crawford's daughter was working. "Afternoon, miss. I am looking for someone who knows the area well. I am trying to locate a piece of land about 10 miles east of here, supposed to be good grazing land near Spillman Creek." "That would be the old Peterson place," the girl replied, "but I do not know much about it." "Maybe ask at the land office, closed today. Sign says back tomorrow. He had a pleasant voice, low and unhurried, with a slight accent that suggested he was from further south, maybe Texas. Mrs. Crawford emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. The Peterson place. That land has been vacant for 2 years now. Old man Peterson moved back east to live with his daughter. Why do you ask? Thinking about buying it if the price is right. I am looking to settle, start my own operation. He glanced around the dining room, his gaze passing over Lila without particular interest. I have been trailing cattle for other men for 8 years. Time to build something of my own. Well, you will have to wait for the land office to open. Mr. Pritchard can tell you everything you need to know. Mrs. Crawford paused. You planning to stay in town? A few days at least while I sort things out. You have rooms available? I do. $2 for the night includes breakfast. That will work fine. Lila finished her coffee and quietly left the dining room, not wanting to be caught staring. But as she climbed the stairs to her room, she could not help but think about what the cowboy had said. He was looking to start his own ranch, which meant he would need help eventually. Ranch hands, certainly, but also someone to manage the house, handle the cooking and cleaning. It was not the kind of work she had imagined for herself, but pride did not pay for food or shelter. She would give it a few days, she decided. Let him settle in, make his decisions about the land. Then, if the opportunity seemed right, she might inquire. It was not begging if it was offering her labor in exchange for fair wages. There was no shame in honest work. The following days fell into a pattern. Lila continued to search for work, though with decreasing hope. She took her meals sparingly, making her money last as long as possible. She saw the cowboy around town occasionally, usually talking with Mr. Pritchard from the land office or examining supplies at the general store. He had a quiet, observant quality about him, the kind of man who listened more than he spoke. His name was James Maddox. She learned from overhearing conversations. He was 28 years old, originally from Texas, and had worked his way up from ranch hand to trail boss over the years. He had saved his money carefully, and was now looking to buy land and build his own cattle operation. People seemed to respect him, which said something in a town where strangers were judged quickly and often harshly. On the 4th day after the auction, Lila was down to $23 and facing the reality that she would soon have to make a decision. She could pay for 1 more week at the hotel, maybe 2 if she ate even less. But then what? The thought of asking for charity made her stomach clench, but the alternative was becoming desperate. She was sitting on a bench outside the general store, watching the street and trying to formulate a plan, when James Maddox walked past. He nodded politely, the way men did when acknowledging a lady, and continued on. But then he paused, turned back, and approached her. "Pardon me, miss, but you are the Bennett girl, are you not? The one who lost the ranch." Heat flooded Lila's face, but she kept her expression neutral. "I am Lila Bennett, yes. I heard about what happened. I am sorry for your loss. Losing family is hard. Losing everything else on top of it is harder. Thank you." She waited for the pity, the awkward suggestions, the offers of help that would make her feel small. Instead, he said, "I bought the Peterson place. Closing the deal tomorrow. It needs a lot of work, but the land is good and the price was fair. I am going out there this afternoon to look it over properly, make some plans. Thing is, I do not know the area that well yet. I could use someone who knows the country, knows the weather patterns, knows which creeks run year-round and which ones dry up in summer. I would be willing to pay for that knowledge if you have the time." Lila looked up at him, searching for condescension or pity in his expression. She found neither. He simply looked like a man with a practical need asking a practical question. "Why me?" "Because you grew up here. Because your father had a reputation as a good rancher who knew the land. Because I figure you inherited some of that knowledge, and knowledge is worth paying for." He paused. "I will pay you $5 for an afternoon of your time. You tell me what I need to know about that piece of land and the area around it, and I will consider it money well spent." $5. That was more than a week's worth of careful rationing. But more than that, it was the way he offered it, not as charity but as a transaction between equals. He needed something, she could provide it, and payment was the natural result. "I can do that," she said. "When do you want to leave? Give me an hour to finish my business at the bank. I will meet you back here with horses." He tipped his hat and walked away, leaving Lila sitting on the bench with something unfamiliar stirring in her chest. It took her a moment to recognize it as hope. An hour later, James returned with 2 horses, a sturdy bay gelding for himself and a gentle-looking sorrel mare for Lila. She was relieved to see that he had chosen a side saddle, which meant she would not have to explain that her current wardrobe did not include practical riding clothes. "She is a calm one," James said, indicating the mare. "Name is Rosie. Borrowed her from the livery." Lila mounted with practiced ease, grateful that at least this was something she still knew how to do. Her father had taught her to ride when she was 6, and she had spent countless hours on horseback helping with the ranch work. They rode east out of Wilson, following the road for a few miles before turning north toward Spillman Creek. The afternoon sun was warm but not oppressive, and a light breeze carried the scent of prairie grass and wildflowers. For the first time in weeks, Lila felt something close to peace. "Tell me about the Petersons," James said as they rode. "What kind of operation did they run?" "Cattle mostly, like everyone around here. They had about 500 head at their peak, but Mr. Peterson was getting old and his sons had no interest in ranching. They moved to Kansas City for work. After Mrs. Peterson died, there was not much keeping him here." Lila gestured toward the horizon. "The land is good. The creek runs year-round, fed by underground springs. You will have enough water even in dry years." "What about winter? How bad does it get?" "Bad enough. Last winter we lost about 10% of the herd to cold and illness. The winter before that was milder, only lost a handful. You need good shelter, enough hay put up, and you need to check on the animals regularly. Cattle can survive cold, but not cold and wet together. If they get wet and then the temperature drops, you will lose them." James listened intently, occasionally asking questions. Lila found herself relaxing into the conversation, sharing information about soil quality, which areas flooded in spring, where the best grazing was in summer, how to read the weather signs that old-timers swore by. He asked intelligent questions, the kind that showed he knew ranching but wanted to understand this specific piece of land. When they reached the Peterson property, Lila felt a pang of nostalgia. She had been here many times growing up, playing with the Peterson children, attending their barn dances, helping with harvests. The house was a simple 2-story structure, weathered but solid, with a barn, a corral, and several outbuildings in various states of disrepair. James dismounted and walked around slowly, examining everything with a critical eye. Lila followed, pointing out features and potential problems. The barn roof needed repair. The corral fence had several broken rails. The windmill that pumped water from the well was rusted and might need replacing. But the bones were good, the foundation was sound, and the land itself was excellent. "What happened to your ranch?" James asked as they stood looking out over the creek. The question was casual, but Lila sensed genuine interest rather than mere politeness. "My father borrowed money to expand the herd 3 years ago. Cattle prices were good and he thought we could grow. Then the prices dropped. Then my parents got sick. By the time I understood how bad the debt was, It was too late to save anything. The words came out matter of fact, but they still hurt to say. You tried to save it. Of course I tried. I sold everything that was not essential. I let the workers go and tried to manage a loan. I even tried to negotiate with the bank, offered to pay in installments. But they wanted their money and they wanted it now, so they took everything. James was quiet for a moment. You know ranching then. You are not just someone who lived on a ranch. You actually know the work. My father did not have sons. He taught me everything he would have taught them. I can brand cattle, mend fences, treat basic illnesses, manage accounts. I can ride, rope, and shoot if I need to. Pride crept into her voice, but it was the kind of pride she had earned. Can you cook? The question surprised her. Yes, of course. Why? Just thinking about what comes next. I can build a ranch, but I cannot do it alone. I will need help, and not just cowboys. Running a place properly takes more than herding cattle. He turned to look at her directly. You are looking for work. It was not a question. Lila felt heat rise in her face again. I have been looking, yes. There is not much available in town. I am going to need someone to manage the house, handle the cooking and cleaning, maybe help with the books and supplies. It would be hard work, long hours, especially at first while I am getting things established. But it would be steady pay and a place to live. I would fix up the old bunkhouse for privacy and propriety. You would have your own space. Lila's heart hammered in her chest. It was exactly what she needed, but accepting felt like admitting defeat, like confirming that she had fallen from ranch owner's daughter to hired help. The pride that had kept her going for weeks reared up, defensive and stubborn. I appreciate the offer, but I am still exploring my options. James studied her for a long moment, and she had the uncomfortable feeling that he could see right through her pretense. All right, but the offer stands if you change your mind. I will be starting work on the place next week. If you decide you are interested, let me know before then. They rode back to Wilson as the sun began setting, painting the sky in brilliant reds and golds. Lila's mind churned the entire way. This was pride talking, she knew that. Pride was telling her to keep looking, to hold out for something better, to not accept a position that felt like a step down from who she used to be. But pride would not pay her bills. Pride would not keep her from ending up desperate and alone. That night, she lay in bed doing calculations in her head. She had enough money for one more week at the hotel. After that, her options were limited to non-existent. She could take James Maddox's offer and have steady work, steady pay, and a roof over her head. Or she could cling to her pride and hope something else came along, knowing full well that nothing would. The choice should have been easy. But pride was a powerful thing, especially when it was all you had left. The next morning, Lila woke with determination. She would find another solution. She would prove that she did not need charity or pity positions. She spent the day making inquiries at ranches outside of town, walking miles in the heat to ask for work. The answers were all the same. No positions available. Sorry, good luck. By evening, she was exhausted, dusty, and no closer to a solution. She returned to her hotel room, washed up, and sat by the window watching the street below. She saw James Maddox walk past, heading toward the saloon with another man, probably one of the ranch hands he was hiring. He looked confident, purposeful, like a man whose future was taking shape exactly as he planned. Lila envied that certainty. She missed knowing what came next, missed having a plan and a place. The ranch had been her whole life, and without it, she felt untethered, like a boat that had slipped its mooring and was drifting toward rocks. 3 more days passed. Lila's money dwindled. She ate 1 meal a day, claiming she was not hungry when Mrs. Crawford offered more. She could feel the older woman's concerned glances but refused to acknowledge them. She would figure this out. She had to. On the 7th day after the auction, Mrs. Crawford knocked on her door. "Lila, honey, we need to talk about next week's rent." "I know, I will have it." The lie tasted bitter. "Will you? Because I cannot keep the room empty if you are not paying, and I know you have not found work." The older woman's voice was gentle but firm. "I am not trying to be cruel, but I have a business to run." "I understand. I will let you know by tomorrow, after Mrs. Crawford left. Lila sat on the bed and finally let herself acknowledge the truth. She was out of options. She could accept James Maddox's offer, or she could end up on the street. Those were her choices. And while her pride screamed against it, her practical mind knew what had to be done. The next morning, she dressed carefully in her best dress, pinned her hair up, and went looking for James. She found him at the general store, purchasing supplies and arranging for delivery to the Peterson place. "Mr. Maddox, may I speak with you?" He turned, and if he was surprised to see her, he did not show it. "Of course, Miss Bennett." She took a breath, forcing the words past the lump in her throat. "I would like to discuss your offer of employment. If the position is still available, I am interested." "It is still available." "When can you start?" "As soon as you need me." "How about tomorrow?" "I am moving out to the property and there is a lot of work to be done. I can offer $20 a month plus room and board. Sundays off unless there is an emergency. Does that seem fair? $20 a month." It was decent pay, enough to slowly save if she was careful. And room and board meant her basic needs would be met. It was more than fair. It was generous, actually, though she would not say that aloud. "That seems fair." "Good. I will have the bunkhouse cleaned up today." "It is not fancy, but it is solid and private. You will have your own space, your own door that locks. I want you to feel safe and comfortable." "Thank you." The words felt inadequate, but they were all she had. James paid for his supplies and walked with her back toward the hotel. "Miss Bennett, I want to be clear about something. This is not charity. I need the help and you have the skills. This is a business arrangement between equals. You work, I pay. Nothing more complicated than that." Lila felt something loosen in her chest. He understood. Somehow this cowboy understood exactly what she needed to hear. "I appreciate that, Mr. Maddox. I will do good work for you." "I do not doubt it, and call me James. If we are going to be working together, we might as well use first names. Then you should call me Lila." He smiled, the first real smile she had seen from him. It transformed his face, making him look younger and more approachable. "All right then, Lila. I will see you tomorrow morning. Pack whatever you need. I will come by with a wagon around 8. That evening, Lila packed her few belongings with mixed feelings. Relief that she had a solution. Shame that she had needed one. Anxiety about what came next. But underneath it all was a small seed of something else. The sense that maybe, just maybe, this was not an ending but a different kind of beginning. James arrived promptly at 8 the next morning with a wagon loaded with supplies. He helped Lila with her carpet bag, his manner polite and professional. They drove out to the Peterson place, now the Maddox place, in comfortable silence broken occasionally by James pointing out landmarks or mentioning his plans for various parts of the property. The bunkhouse had been thoroughly cleaned, Lila discovered. The single room contained a bed with fresh linens, a small table and chair, a washstand, a wood stove for heat, and hooks on the wall for hanging clothes. A window with actual glass panes looked out toward the creek. It was simple but clean and private, just as James had promised. "I know it is not much," James said, standing in the doorway, "but it is yours. I will never come in without knocking and getting permission. Your privacy matters." "It is more than enough. Thank you, James." He nodded and showed her the main house. It was in better shape than the outbuildings but still needed work. Dust covered every surface. The kitchen was functional but bare. Upstairs were 3 bedrooms, all empty. I have been staying in town, but I will move in today, James explained. I will take the bedroom on the right. The other two can stay empty for now. Kitchen needs stocking, but I ordered supplies that should arrive this afternoon. I figure you can tell me what else we need. I can do that. They spent the day working. Lila cleaned the kitchen and main living area while James worked on repairs to the barn. He had hired 2 ranch hands who would start the following week, but for now, it was just the 2 of them. They worked in parallel, crossing paths occasionally but mostly staying out of each other's way. Lila found a strange comfort in the work. Her hands remembered what to do, even if her heart was still adjusting. She scrubbed and swept and organized, transforming the dusty house into something that felt inhabited. When the supplies arrived, she unpacked them methodically, storing everything in logical places. That evening, she cooked dinner for the first time in her new position. Nothing fancy, just beef stew and biscuits, but she made sure it was good. James came in from the barn dusty and tired, washed up at the pump outside, and sat at the kitchen table she had set. "This smells incredible," he said, and the genuine appreciation in his voice made Lila feel something warm in her chest. "It is just stew. Just stew that is not beans and hardtack, which is what I have been eating for weeks. Trust me, this is incredible." They ate in companionable silence. Afterward, Lila cleaned up while James reviewed paperwork by lamplight. It felt strange and familiar all at once, this domestic scene that was both like and unlike her old life. Before she retired to the bunkhouse, James looked up from his papers. "You did good work today, Lila. Thank you. You are welcome. I will see you in the morning." Walking back to the bunkhouse under a sky full of stars, Lila felt the day's exhaustion settle into her bones. But it was good exhaustion, the kind that came from useful work. She prepared for bed, lay down, and for the first time since her parents died, she slept soundly through the night. The days that followed fell into a rhythm. Lila woke early, cooked breakfast, cleaned the house, prepared lunch, tended a small vegetable garden she had started, cooked dinner, and handled various other tasks that arose. James worked from dawn until dark on repairs, improvements, and preparing for the cattle he planned to purchase. The 2 ranch hands, Tom and Billy, arrived as scheduled and proved to be hard workers. Lila and James developed an easy working relationship. They were polite and professional, but also comfortable with each other in a way that made the work easier. James never treated her like hired help exactly. He asked her opinion on things, listened when she offered suggestions, thanked her for her work. In turn, Lila made sure the house ran smoothly, the men were fed well, and the various domestic details were handled. 2 weeks into her employment, James came to her with a problem. "I need to go to Dodge City to buy cattle. It is a 3-day trip there, probably a week total with the buying and trailing them back. Tom and Billy will stay here to keep working on the fences and the barn, but I want to make sure you are comfortable being here without me." "I will be fine. I grew up on a ranch. I know how to handle myself." "I know you do, but I also know you are a woman alone with 2 men you barely know. If you are uncomfortable with that, I can have Tom and Billy come with me and hire different help when I get back." The consideration touched her. "Tom and Billy are good men. I will be fine. You do what you need to do for the ranch." James left the next morning, and Lila settled into managing the household in his absence. Tom and Billy were respectful and kept mostly to themselves, eating the meals she prepared and working hard on their assigned tasks. The days passed smoothly until the 5th day, when a group of men rode onto the property. Lila saw them from the kitchen window, 4 men on horseback, rough-looking and unfamiliar. She felt a spike of fear but forced herself to remain calm. She dried her hands on her apron and walked out onto the porch as they approached. The man in front was large and bearded, with cold eyes that assessed her in a way that made her skin crawl. "Afternoon, miss. This the Maddox place?" "It is. Can I help you gentlemen? We are looking for work." Heard Maddox was hiring. "He has already hired the help he needs. You might try some of the other ranches in the area." The man smiled, showing yellowed teeth. "That is a shame. We came a long way. Least you could do is offer us a meal and some water for the horses." Every instinct told Lila to refuse, but these were dangerous men and she was essentially alone. Tom and Billy were out on the far fence line, too far to help quickly. "I can give you water. For the meal, you will have to wait until my husband returns." It was a lie, a desperate attempt to make these men think she was not as vulnerable as she appeared. The bearded man's eyes narrowed slightly, but he nodded. "Fair enough. We will water the horses and be on our way." They did not leave. Instead, they dismounted and started looking around, peering into the barn, examining the property with proprietary interest. Lila's heart raced, but she kept her expression neutral. "Looks like a nice setup here," one of the other men said. "Shame to waste it on someone who is not even here to protect it. My husband will return any moment." Lila kept her voice steady. "And our ranch hands are just over that rise. One shout and they will come running." The bearded man laughed. "Calm down, miss. We are just looking." No harm in looking. They were still there when Tom and Billy rode back 20 minutes later. The two ranch hands took in the situation quickly, and their hands moved to the rifles on their saddles. "You men need something." Tom's voice was hard. "Just watering our horses and moving on," the bearded man said, his tone suddenly less aggressive. "Then I suggest you do that and be on your way. This is private property." The four men remounted slowly, making a show of their reluctance. The bearded man tipped his hat to Lila with mock courtesy. "Apologies if we disturbed you, madam. Give our regards to your husband." They rode off, and Lila felt her knees go weak with relief. Tom dismounted and approached the porch. "You all right, Miss Lila?" "I am fine. Thank you for coming back when you did. Those were not good men. You did right to be cautious. Billy and I will stay closer to the house until James gets back, just to be safe." That night, Lila locked the door to the bunkhouse and pushed the chair under the handle for extra security. She lay awake for a long time, listening to every sound, before finally drifting into uneasy sleep. James returned 2 days later with 50 head of cattle, and a satisfied expression that faded when Tom pulled him aside for a quiet conversation. Lila was in the kitchen preparing dinner when James knocked on the doorframe. "Tom told me what happened. Are you all right?" "I am fine. They left without causing trouble. They should not have been here at all. I am sorry you had to deal with that." He paused. "Tom said you told them you had a husband. It was the only thing I could think of to make them leave. I am sorry if that causes you any problems." "Problems? Lila, you did exactly right. Quick thinking probably kept a bad situation from getting worse." He leaned against the doorframe. "But it raises a point I have been thinking about anyway. People are going to talk about the arrangement here. A single man and a single woman living on the same property, even with separate quarters. It is the kind of thing that generates gossip." Lila's stomach sank. "Are you letting me go?" "What? No, of course not. You are the best thing that has happened to this place. I just want you to know that I am aware of the potential for talk, and I will do everything I can to protect your reputation. Anyone who has anything inappropriate to say will answer to me." Relief flooded through her. "Thank you, James. You do not need to thank me. You work hard and you deserve respect. That is all there is to it." But Lila noticed over the following weeks that James was scrupulously careful about propriety. He never came to the bunkhouse, never sought her out in the evening after work was done. Their interactions were professional and public. He was protecting her reputation, just as he had promised. The ranch began to take shape. The cattle grazed peacefully. The fences were repaired. The barn got a new roof. James hired another hand and then another as the work expanded. Lila managed the house, cooked for the growing crew, and gradually added small touches that made the place feel less like a work site and more like a home. Curtains in the windows. A tablecloth for the kitchen table. Flowers from the prairie in a jar on the porch. She caught James smiling at the flowers one day. "My mother used to do that," he said quietly. "She always said a house without flowers was just a building." It was the first personal thing he had shared about his past, and Lila found herself curious. "Where is your mother now?" "Died when I was 15. Pneumonia. My father followed 2 years later. After that, I worked for other people's ranches until I saved enough to start my own. I am sorry. Losing parents is hard. You know that better than most." He met her eyes, and in that moment, there was a connection between them, a shared understanding of loss and rebuilding. Then he smiled and changed the subject, and the moment passed. As autumn arrived and the weather began to cool, Lila realized she was content. It was not the life she had imagined for herself, but it was a good life. She had work that mattered, a safe place to sleep, and enough food to eat. More than that, she had purpose. The ranch was thriving partly because of her contributions, and that meant something. One evening in late October, she was preparing dinner when James came in early, which was unusual. "Lila, can we talk?" Her heart jumped. Had she done something wrong? Of course. He sat at the kitchen table, turning his hat in his hands. "I have been thinking about the future of this place, about what it takes to run a successful ranch, and I have realized that I need a partner, not just employees. Someone who can help make decisions, manage things when I am away, be invested in the success of the operation." Lila set down her spoon carefully. "What are you saying?" "I am saying I want to offer you a partnership, not in the legal sense exactly, but in practice. I want your input on major decisions. I want you to have a say in how things are run, and I want to increase your pay to reflect your value to this place." "James, I appreciate that, but I am just the housekeeper and cook. I do not need to be involved in ranching decisions." "You are more than that, and you know it. You understand this land better than I do. You have good instincts about people and situations. You have been helping in ways that go beyond cooking and cleaning, and I want to acknowledge that properly." It was generous, more than generous. But accepting felt like admitting that this was her life now, that she would never get back to being who she used to be. Some stubborn part of her resisted. "I need to think about it," she said finally. "Take all the time you need. The offer stands." That night, Lila lay in bed thinking about James's proposal. Partnership implied a level of commitment, of permanence. It meant accepting that this was her future, at least for the foreseeable time. Part of her wanted to accept immediately, to embrace this opportunity. But another part, the part that still mourned her old life, hesitated. The answer came to her 3 days later in an unexpected way. She was in Wilson picking up supplies when she ran into Margaret Sullivan, a woman who had been a friend of her mother's. Margaret greeted her warmly, asked how she was doing, and listened with genuine interest as Lila explained about her position at the Maddox ranch. "That sounds wonderful, dear. You always were such a capable girl. Your mother would be proud of how you landed on your feet." The words hit Lila like a physical blow. Her mother would be proud. Not ashamed, not disappointed, but proud. Proud that Lila had survived, adapted, kept going. Suddenly, the pride that had been keeping her from fully embracing her new life seemed less like strength and more like stubbornness. She returned to the ranch with the supplies and found James in the barn. "I have thought about your offer," she said without preamble. "I accept. I would be honored to be your partner in running this ranch." His face lit up. "That is wonderful news. Thank you, Lila. I think we make a good team." "I think so too." From that point forward, things shifted. James consulted with Lila on decisions about purchasing cattle, hiring hands, planning improvements. She offered opinions on breeding stock, grazing rotations, and budget management. They fell into an easy partnership that felt natural and right. As winter arrived, bringing snow and bitter cold, the ranch settled into the slower pace of the season. There was still work to be done, animals to care for, but the frantic activity of building and establishing had given way to maintenance and planning. Lila spent more time in the main house during the coldest days, as the bunkhouse was harder to heat. James never commented on it, just made sure there was always hot coffee and a warm fire. They fell into the habit of sitting together in the evenings, going over accounts or discussing plans for spring, their conversations gradually becoming more personal. She learned that James had always dreamed of having his own ranch, that he had saved every penny for 8 years to make it possible. He learned that Lila had wanted to go to college before her parents got sick, that she had dreamed of being a teacher. They shared stories about their childhoods, their losses, their hopes for the future. One snowy evening in December, as they sat by the fire reviewing the accounts, James looked up from the ledger. "Can I ask you something personal?" "You can ask. I might not answer." Lila smiled to soften the words. "You ever regret taking this position? Do you feel like you settled for less than you deserved?" The question surprised her with its insight. "I did at first," she admitted. "I felt like I had failed, like accepting help was admitting defeat. But I do not feel that way anymore. This is honest work and I am good at it. There is no shame in that. You are more than good at it. This place would not be what it is without you." James held her gaze. "I want you to know that I see you as an equal, not as an employee. Your contribution here matters just as much as mine." Something warm unfurled in Lila's chest. "Thank you for saying that. It means more than you know." The moment stretched between them, weighted with unspoken things. Then James cleared his throat and returned to the ledger, and Lila did the same, but something had shifted, some boundary had been crossed, and they both felt it. Christmas came, and Lila cooked a feast for the ranch hands. James gave her a bonus and a beautiful wool shawl from the general store. She gave him a new hat that he immediately declared was the finest he had ever owned. It was a simple Christmas, but it felt like family, which was more than either of them had expected. As the new year of 1883 arrived, Lila found herself thinking about the future in ways she had not allowed herself to before. She was happy here. More than that, she was content. The ranch was thriving. She had purpose and security. And James was a good man, someone she respected and admired. She was also. She admitted to herself one night as she lay in bed listening to the wind howl outside, developing feelings for him that went beyond professional respect. The way he smiled when he saw her in the morning. The way he listened to her opinions as if they mattered. The way he had protected her pride even while offering help. All of it had woven itself into something deeper, something that made her heart beat faster when he was near. But James had never indicated he felt the same way. He was unfailingly polite and respectful, but never inappropriate, never suggesting anything beyond their working partnership. Perhaps she was simply a valued employee to him, nothing more. The thought stung, but Lila was practical enough to accept it if that was the reality. Winter began to loosen its grip in late February. The snow melted, revealing brown grass that would soon turn green. James started making plans for spring activities, talking about expanding the herd, improving the irrigation system, and a dozen other projects. One afternoon, he asked Lila to ride out with him to check on the cattle in the far pasture. They rode side by side, comfortable in each other's presence, discussing plans and sharing observations about the land. When they reached the pasture, James dismounted and walked to the edge of the creek, looking out over the water. "I want to ask you something," he said without turning around, "but I do not want to jeopardize our working relationship or make you uncomfortable." Lila's heart began to race. "What is it?" He turned to face her, his expression serious. "Over the past months, you have become more than a business partner to me, more than a friend even. I find myself thinking about you when I should be thinking about cattle. I look forward to our evenings together more than anything else in my day, and I realize that I have come to care for you in a way that goes beyond professional respect." Lila could barely breathe. "James, wait, let me finish. I know I have no right to feel this way. You came here for work, not for romantic entanglement, and I promise to respect your position and your reputation. If these feelings are not returned, I will never mention them again, and things can continue exactly as they have been. But I had to tell you because keeping it inside was becoming impossible." She dismounted, her legs unsteady, and walked to where he stood. "You think those feelings are not returned?" Hope flickered in his eyes. "Are they?" "I have been trying not to care for you," Lila said quietly. "I told myself it was inappropriate, that I was here to work, that mixing business with personal feelings was a terrible idea. But apparently my heart did not listen to my head because I do care for you, James. Very much." He reached for her hands, holding them gently. "I do not want you to feel obligated. You work for me, and that creates a power imbalance that could make you feel like you have to respond a certain way. I am responding the way I want to respond. I am telling you the truth." She squeezed his hands. "I care for you. Not because you employ me, but because you are a good man. Because you respected my pride when I had nothing else. Because you treat me as an equal. Because you make me laugh and you listen when I talk, and you have never once made me feel small or less than." "Lila." He said her name like a prayer. "Can I court you properly? Can I do this right? You have been courting me for months, you just did not call it that." She smiled. "But yes, you can court me properly if that is what you want. It is what I want more than anything." He leaned down slowly, giving her time to pull away, but she did not. Their first kiss was gentle and sweet, full of promise and possibility. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were smiling. "We should probably head back before the hands send out a search party," James said, though he made no move to leave. "Probably." Lila did not move either. They stood there for several more minutes, hands clasped, looking out over the land that had brought them together. Then they mounted their horses and rode back to the ranch, but everything had changed. The air felt different, charged with new potential. James began courting Lila properly, with all the formality and care that implied. He brought her flowers from town. He asked permission to sit with her in the evenings. He was unfailingly respectful, never assuming anything, always asking. It was old-fashioned and sweet, and Lila treasured every moment. The ranch hands noticed the change and approved. Tom told Lila privately that James was the happiest he had ever seen him. Billy just smiled knowingly and said it was about time. In March, James asked Lila to accompany him to a community dance in Wilson. It would be their first public appearance as a courting couple, and Lila spent an embarrassing amount of time choosing which dress to wear. She finally settled on her mother's blue dress, altered to fit her properly. The dance was held in the church hall, and half the town attended. Lila felt eyes on her as she entered with James, felt the whispers and speculation. But James kept his hand at the small of her back, steady and reassuring, and she held her head high. Margaret Sullivan approached them almost immediately. James Maddox, you have excellent taste. Lila, you look beautiful. Thank you, Mrs. Sullivan. I am so happy to see this. Your mother would have been delighted. Other people approached with well wishes and curiosity. Some were genuinely happy for them. Others were clearly just gathering gossip. Lila handled all of it with grace, while James remained protectively close. When the music started, James led her onto the dance floor. He was a surprisingly good dancer, and Lila found herself relaxing into the rhythm, enjoying the feeling of being held properly, of being claimed publicly as someone special. "You are the most beautiful woman here," James murmured as they danced. "You are biased. Absolutely. Does not make it less true." They danced several dances, then stepped outside for fresh air. The night was clear and cool, stars scattered across the sky like diamonds. James pulled Lila close, and she rested her head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. "I want to marry you," he said quietly. "Not yet, not until you are ready, but I want you to know my intentions are serious. I want to build a life with you, Lila, a real partnership in every sense. I want that too." She looked up at him. "But I need you to understand something. I will not be just a wife who stays in the house and has babies. I want to be involved in running the ranch. I want to contribute. I would not have it any other way. I fell in love with a woman who knows cattle and land and business. That is who I want beside me, not some diminished version who pretends to be helpless." "You fell in love with me," her heart soared. "I did. I do. I love you, Lila Bennett. I love you too, James Maddox." He kissed her under the stars, and Lila felt like she was finally home. They were married in May, in a simple ceremony at the church in Wilson with the ranch hands and half the town in attendance. Lila wore a new dress, white cotton with lace trim, that James insisted on buying despite her protests. She carried wildflowers from the prairie, and Margaret Sullivan cried happy tears in the front pew. James had renovated the main house, adding a proper master bedroom and updating the kitchen. When he carried Lila over the threshold after the ceremony, she laughed at the old-fashioned gesture. "I am not some delicate flower who cannot walk through a door," she teased. "I know. But I have been dreaming about doing this for months, so humor me." Their wedding night was tender and sweet, both of them nervous and excited in equal measure. James was patient and gentle, and Lila felt safe in his arms. Afterward, they lay together talking into the early hours, making plans and dreaming about the future. The summer was busy, as summers always were on a ranch. But now Lila worked beside James not as an employee but as a true partner, and the difference was profound. They made decisions together, celebrated successes together, and faced challenges together. The ranch continued to grow and prosper. In August, Lila realized she was pregnant. She told James one evening after dinner, and his reaction was everything she could have hoped for. He picked her up and spun her around, laughing with pure joy, then immediately became concerned about whether spinning her was safe for the baby. "I am pregnant, not made of glass," she said, but she was laughing too. "I know, but you are carrying our child. That makes you precious." "I was already precious, baby or not." Fair point. As autumn arrived, they settled into preparing for the baby and for winter. James hired additional help so that Lila could reduce her workload, though she refused to stop entirely. She continued to manage the household, keep the books, and contribute to ranch decisions, just at a slightly slower pace. One evening in October, she and James sat on the porch watching the sunset. He had his arm around her shoulders, and she leaned into his warmth, feeling the baby move inside her. "Are you happy?" James asked, deliriously. "No regrets about how we got here?" Lila thought about that auction day over a year ago, about her desperation and pride, about the cowboy who had offered help without crushing her dignity. "Not a single one," Every step led me here to you, to this life. How could I regret that? I love you, Lila Maddox. I love you too. Their son was born in March of 1884, a healthy baby with dark hair and powerful lungs. They named him Thomas James after both of his grandfathers, and James cried when he held his son for the first time. I am going to teach him everything, James said, gazing at the baby with wonder. How to ride, how to rope, how to be a good man. And I will teach him how to read, how to think, how to be kind. Lila smiled. Between the two of us, he will be well-rounded. He will be extraordinary, just like his mother. Life settled into a new rhythm with a baby in the house. Lila discovered she was a capable mother, handling the sleepless nights and endless demands with the same practical competence she applied to everything else. James was a devoted father, coming in from the fields to hold his son, singing lullabies in a surprisingly good voice. The ranch continued to thrive. They added more cattle, hired more hands, and built a new barn. James's reputation grew, and other ranchers sought his advice. Lila became known as a shrewd businesswoman, and people learned to respect her opinions on cattle and land management. In 1886, they had a daughter, Sarah Catherine, named after both of their mothers. She had Lila's blonde hair and James's smile. Thomas, now 2 years old, was fascinated by his baby sister and constantly wanted to help with her care. We make beautiful children, James observed one evening, watching his family with contentment. We do. Should we make more? However many you want. I am a lucky man, and I know it. The years passed in a blur of seasons and milestones. Thomas learned to ride at 4, just as Lila had. Sarah proved to have a gift for numbers and helped her mother with the accounts from a young age. They had another son, Daniel, in 1888, completing their family. The ranch grew into one of the most successful operations in the area. People pointed to the Maddox place as an example of what could be achieved with hard work and smart management. But James and Lila never forgot where they started, never forgot the desperation and pride that had brought them together. They made a point of helping others when they could, hiring hands who were down on their luck, extending credit at the store, offering advice to struggling ranchers. Lila particularly made sure to help women who found themselves in difficult circumstances, remembering her own desperate days and the cowboy who had respected her pride while offering help. One evening in the summer of 1895, Lila and James sat on their porch watching the sun set over land they had built together. Their children were grown now, Thomas preparing to take over more of the ranch operations, Sarah teaching at the Wilson School, Daniel studying veterinary medicine in Kansas City. You remember the day we met? James asked, taking Lila's hand. Of course. You offered me $5 to show you the land. Best $5 I ever spent, he smiled. I knew even then that you were special. The way you held yourself, the way you refused to let circumstances break you, I admired that. I was so stubborn, so determined not to accept help. You were proud. There is a difference, and I loved that about you. Still do. Lila leaned her head on his shoulder. Thank you for seeing me when I had nothing. Thank you for respecting my pride even while you helped me. Thank you for taking a chance on a cowboy with a dream. They sat in comfortable silence as the sky turned pink and gold. 13 years of marriage, 3 children, countless challenges overcome and joys shared. The ranch stretched out before them, a testament to their partnership and their love. No regrets. James asked, echoing a question from years ago. Not a single one. Lila squeezed his hand. This is exactly where I am supposed to be. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the prairie in shades of fire and gold, Lila reflected on the truth of that statement. She had lost everything once, had been living on pride when she had nothing else. But a cowboy had seen past her circumstances to the woman beneath, had offered help in a way that preserved her dignity, and together they had built something extraordinary. Life had not turned out the way she had planned. It had turned out better. Years continued to pass in the rhythm of prairie life, each season bringing its own challenges and rewards. Thomas married in 1898, bringing his bride Catherine to live on the ranch. She was a capable woman who quickly earned Lila's respect and affection. The following year, they gave James and Lila their first grandchild, a boy they named James Thomas, and James cried again just as he had when holding his own firstborn. "You are going to cry at every grandchild," Lila teased, wiping his tears, probably. "I am a sentimental old man. You are 52 and in better shape than men half your age. You are not old." Sarah married a teacher from Junction City in 1900, and they settled in Wilson, where both taught at the expanding school system. She visited the ranch often, bringing her husband, who proved to be a kind and intelligent man who fit into the family easily. Daniel finished his veterinary studies and returned to Wilson in 1901, setting up a practice that served ranches throughout the county. He remained unmarried, claiming he was too busy building his business to think about romance, though Lila suspected he was simply particular about finding the right woman. The ranch continued to prosper under Thomas's management, with James stepping back to an advisory role. He still rode the property most days, checking on cattle and land out of habit more than necessity, but he no longer worked from dawn to dusk. Instead, he spent more time with Lila, the two of them often sitting together in the evenings, reading or talking or simply enjoying each other's presence. In 1903, on a golden afternoon in September, James and Lila rode out to Spillman Creek, the place where their courtship had truly begun 20 years earlier. The land looked much the same, though the ranch around it had grown and changed. They dismounted and stood at the creek's edge, holding hands. "I was so nervous that day," James confessed. "When I told you how I felt, I was sure you would reject me." "I was terrified," Lila admitted. "I had convinced myself that you could never see me as anything more than an employee. Finding out you felt the same way I did was overwhelming. Best day of my life until our wedding, and then when each of our children were born. Actually, I have had a lot of best days," he smiled. "All of them with you, smooth talker." But Lila was smiling too. James pulled her close, and they stood there in the fading afternoon light. Two people who had found each other in the midst of hardship and built a life of love and partnership. The creek burbled past, constant and eternal, bearing witness to their history. "I want you to know something," James said seriously. "Everything we have built here, it is as much yours as mine. The land, the cattle, the success, none of it would exist without you. You are not just my wife, you are my partner in every sense. I know that. You have never made me feel otherwise. Good. Because when we are gone, when the children inherit all of this, I want them to understand that their mother was the strength behind everything. You are the one who kept going when things were hard. You are the one who made this place a home and not just a ranch." Lila felt tears prick her eyes. "We did it together, James. Every step. We did. And I would do it all again, exactly the same way, as long as it led me to you." They kissed there by the creek, the same creek where they had first confessed their love, and Lila felt the same flutter in her heart that she had felt all those years ago. Some things never changed, and her love for this man was one of them. As they rode back to the ranch, they talked about the future, about grandchildren and retirement and eventually passing the ranch to the next generation. They talked about traveling, maybe taking a trip to San Francisco or even to Europe. They talked about all the small and large dreams that made up a life. That evening, the whole family gathered for dinner, a tradition they had maintained whenever possible. The table was crowded with children, spouses, and grandchildren. The noise level was tremendous, with multiple conversations happening simultaneously, babies crying, children laughing. It was chaotic and wonderful. James stood and tapped his glass, calling for attention. "I want to say something. 21 years ago, I came to Wilson looking for land. Instead, I found something much more valuable. I found Lila." "Oh no, he is going to get sentimental," Thomas said with affection. "Let me finish, son. I found Lila and she agreed to work for me and then to court with me and then to marry me. Every day since has been a gift. So I want to raise a glass to my wife, my partner, the love of my life. Thank you for saying yes all those years ago. Thank you for building this life with me." To Lila, everyone chorused, raising their glasses. Lila felt her face flush with pleasure. "You are all going to make me cry, and I refuse to cry in front of everyone." "Too late, Mama. You are already crying," Sarah said with a laugh. And she was, happy tears that she did not bother to hide. She looked around the table at the family she and James had created, at the life they had built from nothing, and felt overwhelming gratitude. After dinner, as people dispersed to various activities, Lila and James found themselves alone on the porch again, their favorite spot. The evening was cool, autumn making itself known, and James draped a blanket over Lila's shoulders. "You ever think about that auction day?" Lila asked. "About how different things could have been if you had not offered me that job, sometimes. It terrifies me to think about. What if I had not been confident enough to offer? What if you had been too proud to accept? So many things could have gone differently. But they did not. We found each other and we found our way together." "We did." James was quiet for a moment. "Can I tell you something I never told you before?" "Always." "That day I offered you the job, it was not entirely about needing help. I mean, I did need help, but I could have hired anyone. I offered it to you specifically because I saw how you were struggling and I wanted to help. But I knew you would never accept charity, so I framed it as something I needed. Does that bother you?" Lila considered this. "A few years ago it might have. But now, no, it does not bother me. You saw what I needed and found a way to offer it that preserved my dignity. That was kind, not manipulative. I am glad you see it that way. I have always wondered if I should have been more honest from the start. You were honest about the things that mattered. You treated me with respect. You saw me as capable and valuable. That is what mattered." She took his hand. "Besides, even if you offered the job partly to help me, I still earned my place here. I worked hard. I proved my value. So maybe you opened the door, but I walked through it on my own merit. You did. And you have exceeded every expectation, every dream I had for what this place could become." They sat together as darkness fell, wrapped in the blanket, comfortable in their shared silence. Inside the house, they could hear grandchildren playing, their children talking and laughing. It was the sound of family, of legacy, of a life well lived. The years that followed were gentle ones. James and Lila aged gracefully, their love deepening with time rather than fading. They watched their children thrive, their grandchildren grow. Daniel eventually married a widow from Wilson, a woman with 2 children of her own, and the family expanded further. In 1910, they celebrated their 25th wedding anniversary with a party that seemed to include half of Wilson. People came from miles around to honor the couple who had built one of the most successful ranches in the region, while also being known for their generosity and fairness. 25 years, Lila marveled as they danced together. "It feels like yesterday and forever ago all at once." "Here is to 25 more," James said. "At least," Lila agreed. They were blessed to have those years and more. The ranch continued under Thomas's capable management, eventually passing to his son James Thomas, ensuring the legacy would continue. Sarah's children grew up to be teachers and scholars, carrying on her love of education. Daniel's practice became the largest veterinary service in 3 counties, and his stepchildren proved to be as devoted to him as any biological children could have been. Through it all, James and Lila remained the heart of the family, the foundation upon which everything else was built. They were consulted on major decisions, sought out for advice, beloved by children and grandchildren alike. On a summer evening in 1920, when James was 73 and Lila was 61, they sat once more on their porch, watching the sunset paint the prairie gold. They had been married for 37 years and loved each other for even longer. "I've had a good life," James said quietly, "better than I ever imagined possible." "We have had a good life," Lila corrected. Together, he agreed. "That was always the secret, was it not? We were stronger together than either of us could have been alone. We are." They sat holding hands, 2 old people who had weathered decades of life together, who had built an empire from dust and determination, who had raised children and watched them thrive, who had loved deeply and completely. "No regrets?" James asked one final time. "Not a single one," Lila replied, just as she always had. And there on the porch of the ranch they had built together, surrounded by the legacy of their love, James Maddox and Lila Bennett Maddox watched the sun set on another perfect day, knowing that whatever came next, they would face it together, just as they always had. Their children and grandchildren would tell their story for generations. The woman who lived on pride when she had nothing else, and the cowboy who helped without touching that pride. It was a love story that began with mutual respect and grew into something extraordinary, a partnership that built not just a ranch but a family, a legacy, a life. And in the end, that was the greatest success of all. Not the land or the cattle or the money, but the love that had sustained them through everything, the partnership that had made them both stronger, the family they had created together. As the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, James and Lila rose slowly, their bodies protesting the movement in the way that old bodies do, and walked inside together, still holding hands, still in love, still partners in every sense that mattered. The ranch would continue without them eventually, passing to new generations who would add their own chapters to the story. But the foundation James and Lila had built, based on mutual respect, hard work, and deep love, would remain. It would be the bedrock upon which all future success was built. And somewhere in the fabric of that legacy would always be the memory of an auction day in 1882, when a woman lost everything but her pride, and a cowboy who understood that sometimes the greatest help you can give someone is to preserve their dignity while offering them a chance to rebuild. That was the beginning. Everything that came after, all the joy and success and love, grew from that single moment of respect and understanding between 2 people who would go on to build a life together that exceeded all their dreams. The end.